So welcome to the Meaningful Jobs podcast, season 3. I'm your host, Adrian, and today we're extremely honored to welcome Mauricio Galvez, who is the employer brand and sourcing manager for Diageo. So how are you, Mauricio? Hope you're doing well.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to finally be here. This is an
Yeah,
invitation
we have been
that we
talking
planned.
about this for quite a while already, and it's good to have a chat with you, see your thoughts in terms of what it's like joining Diageo, and to let the audience know a little bit about your background as well. So, can you tell us how you got into employer branding? Because it's not a career that most people will immediately think about. Can you walk us through how you got to this point?
Absolutely. So I have like around 10 years of experience, a little bit longer than that. And when I say longer, it'd just be like 10 years and a couple months. I started my career, like my professional career, back when I was when I was back still in school. I
Hmm.
was during the last year and a half, so my last 3 semesters in the university. I started an internship within the talent acquisition department for a different company, Dell. I've had the opportunity and blessing to work for some of the best and bigger companies in the world. I'll let you know what it
Hmm.
was during the process. Adrian, stop me at any point if you have any doubt, any question.
Well, I'm
So
sure I'll be happy to talk about beer all day long with you. But yeah, so you said you were in Dell at first, but I guess you weren't in employer branding, right, at first?
no. So my first year and a half, I was in recruitment. That was when I started. My entire background is within recruitment. So I've done different things within recruitment. I've done your normal, like your end-to-end point recruitment. I've done sourcing, which is that headhunting executive recruitment part. I've done recruitment for like niche positions. I've done mass recruitment.
Hmm.
And during after that year and a half, I had the opportunity within Dell to start expanding my skill set. And
Hmm.
they invited me over to a position for an employer brand positions. I'm a communications major. So it was like a very natural step for me. Like, hey, use what you know from recruitment, try to implement it within employer brand, what we started to do 10 years ago within recruitment, within employer brand. And let's see how we can start building a strategy for one of the most important markets in the world, which was Brazil. So I had the opportunity to move to Brazil at that point. I worked over there for like a year and a couple of months. I was able to promote that strategy to really up the brand within the market and really form a strategy that was able to outlast me. What do I mean with
Hmm.
this? It's a strategy that in some shape, way, or form, it's still being used in the market. I think we set the basis for what was employer brand in that country, in that market, and that position landed me on my next role, which
Hmm.
was also within Dell. That was um, to be the employer brand specialist for the United States market.
Hmm.
So, my manager at that point, she told me, "Hey, we need to replicate a little bit of what you're doing here in Brazil. We need to revamp our employer brand in the US. Let's just try to see what we can make." And I was able to go into that position. I was in that position also for like a year and a half. Another amazing opportunity I've had, and that's the point in which I started learning like the two
Hmm.
sides of recruitment. What it's like to recruit as a recruiter per se, and on the other side, what it's like to promote the role where you're going to start. So that actually allowed me to really understand employer brand at a
Hmm.
point in which employer brand was not very common.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to ask, before we dive deeper into employer branding. So you said you were originally from Brazil, then you moved.
No,
Oh, you weren't, right?
I'm from Mexico. Sorry, I'm from
Oh, from
Mexico. I
Mexico. All right.
started with that. I'm from Mexico. I moved to Brazil for that year for work, and then I came back.
I guess our audience is quite interested in wondering how it's like moving between countries, from Mexico to Brazil, even though I think you both speak Spanish. Are there any like huge differences, you think?
One thing, there's a similarity within the language. I hope it doesn't piss anyone off. I think there's a big similarity between Portuguese, the language that is spoken in Brazil, and what was and Spanish.
Yeah.
Language was the first like initial barrier, but for me it was a very interesting process because I
Mm,
moved like 1 month after I graduated from school. So I had my graduation in May of
yeah.
2015, and I was moving to another country by June of that same year. So everything moved pretty fast. Everything was very exciting, but very challenging for me. Actually, that is one of the best years in my life. I can be completely honest with that. because it allowed me not only to grow on the professional side, but grow
Mm-hmm.
also on the personal side.
Mm.
But trying to not take as long as this answer as possible, I can say that moving to another country is always going to be a challenge. But if the right motivations are there to move, it's going to be a fantastic experience. It's something that I would pretty much recommend to almost everyone in my group or my circle.
I see. So, then, moving from Brazil to the States, how much of a difference is that? Because
That was
obviously, yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead, finish your question.
No, because I was just thinking that, in the US, there's a reputation for, everybody being workaholics, right? So was it like an easy transition, and what were the challenges?
That's actually like a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
I was working for the U.S. market, but I didn't move to the U.S.
Mm.
I'll walk you through that. I moved after Brazil. I moved to Panama. That was the place where a lot of our operations were centralized within recruitment. So I was working from Panama. I worked in Panama for a couple months, and then I came back to
Mm.
Mexico. I came back to my hometown, and I came back on a fully remote position. That was very interesting because we're talking about 2016, 2017.
Wow.
So that was a couple of years.
That
That
wasn't
was
a thing back then.
the couple of years before everyone went home to work. So I was already a seasoned veteran when it came to working from home when the pandemic started. So I started working remotely for multinational teams very early on in my career. I
Mm.
actually had to start working that position when I was like 27, 20 something years old. So I started working for the US. But at the end of the day, and I think that coming back to your question, I don't think like the US culture per se is workaholic, but they're very focused on finishing the objectives, on getting
Yeah.
what you need to get done. And that might take you a couple hours one time, and that might take you 3 days another time. So it's just about really figuring out who you're working with. And that actually for me was a fantastic learning experience because it allowed me to start learning very young in my career different styles of work. So at this point, if
Mm.
I know I'm working with a peer from the US, I know how to work with that person. If I'm working with someone from Europe, from Asia, I really know how to really fix myself to that person. And at the end, like try to really shorten the cultural differences that we might have.
Mm. So what advice would you give for people who are maybe considering an international move? Obviously, it's going to be, quite an anxious decision if people do make the decision to travel abroad. But yeah, based on your experience, do you have any advice for these people?
Absolutely. I would say go forward. I think that at the end, and as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, it's all about the right motivation. I think that you need to evaluate which point of your life you are. I think that if you had the opportunity, you should really strongly consider it. I mean, you should also evaluate if you are married, if you're not, if you're close to your family, if you're very close to your friends, if you like to travel, if you're more of a kind of like a home person, that you really like your space. You really need to think that being outside of your country, being outside of the place where you have lived 20, 30, 35 years, it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be the definition of taking you out of your comfort zone. So I'm all about to really like go ahead and evaluate all the points, both the good and the bad points of not bad, but like what are going to be the advantages and what are going to be the disadvantages of being outside of your comfort zone and outside of the place where you live. Do a very deep dive and say, hey, this might be an opportunity that I want to take now, or this might be an opportunity that I want to consider 3 years down the road, things like that.
Mm.
So at the end of the day, my first quick question will be do it. This is something that I would strongly recommend if you have the opportunity to work abroad. And I think that's a fantastic way of seeing the world. It's if you go somewhere else and you work over there and you are able to sustain yourself financially while also like really getting a deep dive into that culture, that's going to be a fantastic opportunity for you. But always consider that the personal side has to be extremely valuable for you.
Mm.
Always keep an eye on what happens inside of your head. And if you
Mm.
don't think you're ready at that point, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's that. But you should feel ready and you should say, hey, I want to do this because this is what I want inside of me. This is what I really want for my career. This is what I want for me personally. Never,
Mm.
never, ever compromise your personal side for your professional side.
So how do you feel, moving back to your home country after all these years? Because it's kind of like a full circle relationship, right? what are the kind of feelings or reflections that you might have, going back to your home city?
Actually, that for me at that point when I came back, it was very interesting to really like go back after being away for a couple of years. Um, Obviously, a lot of things. I'm not from a big place. I'm not from a big city here in Mexico. So coming back, not a lot of things change. But
Mm,
what does happen is that you come with different mentality. You learn that there are different ways of doing things. There are different people around the world. There are different foods that people eat. There are different traditions. So I know it really sounds like a cliche, but really being in other places really opens your mind to a
mm,
possibility of doing certain things differently or eating certain things differently or celebrating different things on a different manner. And coming back to the conversation that we had within this podcast, it gives you a different idea that working culture and working and doing stuff can be completely different, even though that you might be doing the same thing.
mm. So, talking a little bit back about employer branding. So I think you mentioned that you said you try and separate it into two things. So one is about recruitment overall, and one is more specific in regards to the role. So yeah, can you dive deeper as in what are your responsibilities in the two and how you differentiate both?
Absolutely. So at this point, and I'm gonna go and do like a broad explanation of what employer branding is. For me, and really the understanding of what employer brand is and where can you differentiate it. It's very common that people say, "Hey, this is just marketing." I don't think it's the same as marketing. I'm not saying that it's completely different, but at the end of the day,
Mm,
marketing tries the purpose of marketing is selling a product or a service.
yeah.
The main goal of employer brand is selling the idea of working somewhere. I think it's a very similar process in the way that someone is gonna do something thanks to what you're telling him or her. But for me, it's you really gotta understand that the consumer brand of whatever company that you are and the career brands of whatever company where you are, those two things are gonna be separate, but they really need to align one with each other. At the end of the day, I call the combination of those two things what make you into an employer of choice. Like
Mm,
being and I know that's another common word that we use in this arena. That being an employer of choice is all about being a company where people want to work in and where people can really feel a rapport with whatever product or service that you're doing. So for me, understanding that idea, it's one point, and the other one, it's how do you take your candidates through that process. One of the main things that people ask me whenever we're having this conversation, it's say, hey, how is employer brand going to help us for attraction, but how also is going to employer brand help us for retaining talent? So those, even though that there are two different parts of the process, I think that they are the same thing, just with a different timelines. When you say, hey, come over to this company, we're going to give you X, C, and Y, and we're promoting that we have this capability within the company, the best retention tool that employer branding is going to give you is the fact that you as a company deliver on everything that you promise on the attraction process. So that for
mm,
me is really understanding like the entirety of the candidate experience. You're gonna track people and you're gonna ask people for their time
mm,
to go and apply to the web pages. You're gonna ask them time to go and interview with the people in your company. So whenever that you take them through that process, be aware that that you are having a conversation with real people with real
mm,
aspirations. Like try to do your processes as humane as possible. Be mindful that people either want or need this job.
mm,
Any of those two things are an important factor in the process. They might want it or they might need it, and then you're trading with aspirations and desires. But at the end of the day, I think that employer brand it's all about that, like really encapsulating what your company is in and of itself. What is it promoting? Like what are we selling as a company? What's the value that we're selling as a company? And that's going to give you the employee value proposition, which is what else am I going to get from working at this company besides the salary? And that's
mm.
what's really important with employer.
I think it's interesting you made the differentiation between employer branding and marketing because I always kind of bundled this together. So I'm just wondering, like, how closely you guys work with the marketing department and whether you think, in principle, that you guys should be working closely with marketing, because at the end of the day, you do represent your brand.
It has to be a very close relationship, because at the end of the day, we as employer brand, we cannot say anything that it's not approved by either communications or marketing. We need to respect, and being honest, we are one of the most important parts of respecting the brand identity and really being conscious with what's our brand identity. So at the end of the day, there's a very close-knit relationship between the two organizations. For me, the main point is that marketing comes from a selling standpoint. Like, how are we going to promote our brands to be acquired by our markets? And in our brand, we say, hey, how are we going to make our career brand more attractive to our market? How are we going to bring more people? And this comes from a recruitment standpoint, and the other one comes from a marketing standpoint. At the end of the day, and I really want to be very, very, very strong with this. A good employer brand strategy should come from a recruitment standpoint. You should know how many people are you looking for, what's your rotation. You should know how many positions are you going to have, where are going to be your areas where you're going to require talent in 6 months, a year from now. I think that's where the main difference is. When you do recruitment when you do employer brand with a recruitment mindset, everything's going to change within your strategy.
So, moving on, talking a little bit about Diageo. So, what's in it for people to work in Diageo, and, for yourself, why do you enjoy working in Diageo so much?
Absolutely. I think that for me, this is a relatively recent question that I've been asking. I've just been in Diageo for the past 6 months. It was a fantastic process for me. Like, the idea of coming to Diageo, it was an opportunity for me to work in one of the most important multinational companies, one of the most important alcoholic and spirit and alcoholic beverage companies in the world. And for me, it was the opportunity to work at a company in which what I was telling you a little bit earlier. I was not only going to be an employee, but I'm also a consumer of the brands. Diageo as a company, we have some of the most important brands out there. We have Tequila Julio, we have the Tanqueray gin, we have Captain Morgan rum, we have Johnny Walker whiskey, we have the Guinness beer. So there's a lot of brands that I was already a consumer at some point. So for me, it was the idea of, hey, let's just come to a company in which I'm going to be both a consumer, an enjoyer of the final product, and also part of the entire recruitment process. So that for me was a good match between being both a consumer and an employee of a company.
Yeah, everybody likes a drink at some point.
Yeah,
so
and one of the main things that I want to let you know, we are expanding. We as a company, we're expanding into non-alcoholic alcohols. For example, there's a new non-alcoholic beer that we're running. There's a new alcoholic rum that we're producing, and these are new ways in which, when I started working in this company, I realized, hey, this is very inclusive. This is a very inclusive way of bringing more people into your consumer fold, and that for me is one of the most fascinating things that I started learning within this company. It's all about celebrating the good moments in your life.
And so what's in it for people to join, aside from a paycheck? Like, how can they keep track of the contributions they make to society through their work?
Absolutely. So one of the main things that I'm gonna refer you, it's we are very, very keen on the information that we put on our web pages. So I would definitely invite you to go into Diageo.com and really take a deep dive into different markets. One of the most interesting things in this company is seeing what we're doing in different markets, what we're doing in Latin America, what we're doing in Europe, what we're doing in the other markets where we have presence. I think that as far as what's beyond the page in this company, you're going to come and come and work with a group of very passionate people. I think that was one of the first things that I realized when I came here. At Diageo, there's most of the people that work here, and I'm going to quote myself, we are passionate about what we do. And that for me is something that really moves the needle, in the sense of, you come here and you see people that are working with their heart on the sleeve for the different brands, the different regions. And that for me was a fantastic thing to say. I'm not saying that this is something that didn't happen on my previous companies, but when I came in here, it was just a different feeling. So that was something that I truly love about this company.
So, in terms of the meaning of work for yourself, so, it's very easy to maybe have a lot of aspirations, before, joining a new company, like, oh, I want to contribute in this area or that area. But at the end of the day, there's quite, a lot of stress, sometimes, when things don't go your way. So how do you kind of navigate this, and how do you keep the bigger picture in mind?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think that at the end of the day, for me, it's all about one of the best things that I want to do whenever I start working on a new project. It's understanding the objectives and the milestones that you're going to get. So for me, I think that if you're able to develop what it's called like a tunnel vision, it's going to allow you to see that at the end of the day, there's going to be like a goal line, like the point where you want to arrive. But enjoying every little thing that you do in the process, like I think that for me, it's all about testing. Certain things are gonna give you a positive result. Other things are not gonna give you that of a positive result or even a bad result. I think that for me, it's all about learning what's working, what's not working. How can you use that feedback to improve on the next thing that you do? So for me, at the end of the day, it's all about not losing sight of what's the objective, what's the goal, but also not losing the ability of enjoying most of the small things that you do day to day. I think that's a very easy thing that could happen, that you just get lost in the entire process and say, hey, this is going to be a 1-year project that I need to develop. I don't think that I'm going to feel like I'm contributing until 12 months from now. But no, whatever you do in the first month, it's going to be important. What you do in your second month, it's going to be important. All of that builds into what the end result is.
I think it's great you mentioned about enjoying the small things, because there must be some repetition in any job. So do you have a secret sauce in terms of how you try and enjoy all the small things you do?
I think that at the end of the day, it's about really trying to find the value on what you're adding. It could be value for yourself, it could be value for your team, it could be value for your company at the end of the day. And I think that I'm not going to say there's a secret sauce. I think that having a good communication and a good relationship with your team, or whoever your extended peers or group where you're working, whenever you see what they're also doing and how you can collaborate with them, there are going to be times in which you're not going to be as busy as you usually are. Maybe extending the hand and say, hey, is there something in which you need help? Is there something that you can teach me? Is there something that I could learn? And I think that ability, and you mentioned a key thing, a lot of things are going to be very repetitive, but seeing the same thing with different eyes every time, I think that's a fantastic thing to do. At the end, one day, maybe you can see, let's say that you're a web developer, and I'm using this as a good example. You as a web developer, you're going to go into like the inner balance, like on the really finer details of how you build a web page. But one day, how about if you go to that page as a user, not as a developer, and see from the other side what it's like to navigate through that page? And I think that applies to mostly every responsibility. Like one day, take a step back and see, hey, what it's like to be on the other side of what I do, and that's going to open your eyes for a lot of things. And that for me, it's one of the main things that I do to always keep myself entertained and fascinated by what I do.
I think it's a great parable that you just mentioned. Sometimes it's, we become really focused on what we do, but we forget the bigger picture, and just to take a step back, and things might look a lot different. So, lastly, do you have any career advice for people who might be struggling in their jobs and thinking about changing their careers? What are the kind of factors you would consider?
Absolutely. I think that the first thing that I would say is reach out. Reach out to people within your circle, within your network. I think that for me, it's open yourself up to the conversations, to both the difficult and the easy good conversations, and say and understand that you're not alone in this process. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people going through layoff, they feel stagnated in their career. Don't be afraid to say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling okay. and I'm coming back again to that point in one of the first questions. Take care of your brain, of your mental side first. Say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling okay. I'm not feeling in the right place. What else could I learn? And be honest and be really open about it and say, hey, and if you go with someone that you aspire to be where that person is, and you aspire to be at that position, or someone that you really admire professionally or personally, say, hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this. What would you recommend? What are certain things that you think that I could learn or start doing that could help out in my career? Maybe what you need at this point is just a change of scenario. Maybe what you need at certain point is just learning another language. Maybe what you need at certain point is just changing where you are applying. Well, maybe what you need to do is just changing how you interview, how you respond to certain things in interviews. And we always think like these things are just gonna be solved with the most massive thing that we could change. And sometimes, and I could say most of the times, it's all about those details, like those finer things that we can start tweaking. And we can, whenever that we're honest, we start realizing what are those tweaks that we can do. That I think that's where the main changes are.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I love the work that you're doing with Diageo, and wish you all the best.
Same. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Adrian. It was a pleasure being here.